In 1911, a paddle steamer was traveling through Lake Buena Vista in Florida when it stumbled upon a preserved island home to a couple of alligators and a family of herons. The paddle steamer belonged to none other than Meriwether Pleasure, an explorer of the seas who had set out for the unknown with his family. Meriwether Pleasure was an explorer, an inventor, and a collector. The Pleasure family arrived with a great plan to establish Pleasure Canvas and Sailmaking Limited, and upon arrival, the overgrown island became a flurry of construction, and within a year the Florida wilderness was no more. It had been overtaken by a sail-making factory. Before too long, the factory was joined by a power plant, a brass foundry, town center, and more. In 1920, the long-suffering wife of Meriwether, Isabella, gave her husband the ultimatum: find a new location to house his ever-growing collection of oddities, or she would do it for him. So Meriwether Pleasure opened a new library on the island, a library that would become a social club for all his globe-trotting pals, a secret social place for explorers and adventurers, a headquarters for the Adventurers Club. This was until 1955, when Hurricane Connie struck the island, closing off the rusting remains of the island to the outside world, and it seemed this island of pleasure and its Adventurers Club would be lost forever.
At least that's the story Disney told when creating one of its most loved and missed experiences of all time. A club, a restaurant, an attraction, a bar, a show, and an improvisation theatre, all amalgamated into one. The Adventurers Club was something original and unique for Disney, a venue where you weren't just an observer, but where you became directly part of the show, story, and experience. For Review Time, I'm Luke Carroll, and this is the history of the Adventurers Club on Pleasure Island. Now, before we take a look at the Adventurers Club itself, let's take a quick look at what was happening within Disney at the time and the history of Pleasure Island itself. The 1980s at Disney, under the direction of Michael Eisner, saw lots of ideas borrowed from other entertainment ventures around America. Pleasure Island was no different, taking its inspiration from Church Street in downtown Orlando, which saw an old abandoned railway station transformed into an entertainment hotspot, filled with nightclubs charging a single price to hop between any of the clubs in one night. Eisner saw this as a great option to bring into Walt Disney World to help the struggling Walt Disney World shopping village. Nightclubs would also help Eisner fulfill his goal of making Disney a hip, trendy place that appealed to the teenage demographic as well. If you want to know about one of the biggest failures of this goal, make sure to check out our history video on the Enchanted Tiki Room under new management. So in 1986, a group of Imagineers conveniently stumbled across the overgrown remains of Meriwether Pleasure's Island, conveniently just steps away from their shopping village. Imagineers designed Pleasure Island to feel like a real historical world that had been built over the course of decades. Each corner of the island was designed to further the story of Meriwether Pleasure and his family's use of the island. A ticket to Pleasure Island was more than just an entry to bars, restaurants, and clubs. You became a part of the story of the Pleasure family and the journey that had led them to this island. You walked past their mansion, which was now home to the Portobello Yacht Club. The paddle wheeler that had brought them to the island was now home to Fulton's Crab Shack. The power plant is now the Comedy Warehouse. Now, the island may have looked over 100 years old, and that was the point. This was the beginning of an era when repurposing old buildings into hip new venues was all the rage, a trend that still continues to this day. But amongst this immersive world was one venue that hosted something very different from the rest. This was the Adventurers Club. The founding of this club follows back to two well-known Imagineers. Chris Carradine, the vice president of WDI at the time, came up with the idea and sketched it out on cocktail napkins one evening. Chris proclaimed that the club would have twice as many rooms as guests would ever see, expressing the immense detail and backstory the place would contain. Now, the other leading figure was Joe Rohde, known for his attention to detail in projects such as Disney's Animal Kingdom. The inspiration for the club's atmosphere came from an annual party he would host entitled The Last Days of the Raj, where Rohde and his friends would dress in British colonial attire. It was said to have come out of our collective shared love of the pith helmet. It was a place we always wanted to go, but didn't exist. And so, the Adventurers Club was born, going from a drawing on a cocktail napkin to one of the most beloved experiences to ever grace Walt Disney World. Approaching the Adventurers Club, you notice how different it looks from the rest of Pleasure Island. The building emits a sense of mystery itself, with climbing vines working their way up towards a giant obelisk pointing towards the sky. The walls of the building are beginning to chip away, leaving behind ancient runes in a language we are yet to understand. Luckily for us, tonight the Adventurers Club is hosting an open house for New Year's Eve 1937. As it is tonight, and every night, a banner greets you as you enter, proclaiming, "Come in a stranger, leave a little stranger." Upon entering the club, you step foot into the Zebra Mezzanine, where you are greeted by Graves, the club's lifelong butler, welcoming you back. Luckily, while you were out exploring, he took care of your mail for you. On a platter, Graves would hand you a letter, a souvenir envelope containing comedic letters that would set the tone for the night to come. With your letter in hand, you step into the club's grandiose entrance, the mezzanine, giving you an amazing overhead view of the club's main salon. Looking around, you notice the amazing detail that the club has. The walls are filled with flags, photos, and oddities, and standing in the center of the room is a famous bronze sculpture of Zeus, though, lovingly, his lightning bolt has been replaced by a fishing rod. Walking down the steps into the salon, you find the club's main bar. Here you can meander around talking to some of the club's most noteworthy members. And this is where the true beauty of the Adventurers Club is. All throughout the club, characters mill around, each with their own lives and backstories that they are happy to explain. Every character is played by an incredibly talented improviser. Imagine the citizens of Hollywood from Hollywood Studios, with an even grander backstory that they are happy to tell you all about. To begin your night, you gather in the main salon to pledge your allegiance to the club and recite the club creed as established by founder Merriweather Pleasure himself. "We climb the highest mountains just to get a better view. We plumb the deepest oceans 'cause we're daring through and through. We cross the scorching deserts, martini in our hands. We ski the polar ice caps in tuxedo, looking grand. We are reckless, brave, and loyal, and valiant to the end. If you come in here a stranger, you will exit as a friend." The recitation finishes with the club's official greeting, Kungaloosh, and the awakening of the club's official Gleemeister, the Colonel, usually found asleep above the salon, but easily awoken with his favorite phrase, "Free drink, Colonel!" Luckily, this would get his attention, and he would lead the club in songs such as my personal favorite, the Do-Re-Mi drinking song.
Do with which I buy my beer, Re the guy I buy beer from, me the guy I buy beer for, from a distance to the store, so I think I'll have a beer, la 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 la, no thanks, I'll have a beer, and that brings us back to
The Adventurers Club is full of theatrical secrets like the Colonel, a puppet brought to life by a skilled improviser behind the wall. Other rooms to explore throughout the club included the Mask Room, a small room decorated in dozens of masks from around the world, many of which will move, laugh, and even awaken to perform improv routines, often making jokes at the expense of the people sitting in the room. The Treasure Room was another small side room that would host lectures throughout the evening, often including the Genie Beazle, another ingeniously designed character who appeared as a floating head, giving a comedic back and forth with the lecturer in the room. The largest room in the club, though, was the library, not just a resource of books full of adventurous stories, but also home to the club's main stage. Throughout the night, the library would come alive with various shows, musical numbers, and special events. There was the welcoming party, cabarets, sing-alongs, and more, including one of the most memorable events of the club, a nightly radio broadcast of the serial radio show Tales of the Adventurers Club. Unfortunately, in the classic themed entertainment style, half the cast had gone missing and required quick replacement actors to be found among the audience members. Another fan favourite of the library room was a variety show where members of the club attempted to raise $2,000 to pay for the club's lease. on the last night of operation of the club, for the first time in history, they failed to raise the required funds. Now, your night at the Adventurers Club wraps up with the ringing in of the brand new year of 1938, when the club moves outside at 11:45 p.m. to watch the celebratory fireworks finale, and wraps up your night and experience at one of the most unique places Disney Imagineers had ever dreamed up. Every square inch of the club was part of a living, fully immersive themed environment. If you came back to the club, you would always find familiar and new faces to invest in the stories of. The club was a community, a group of explorers who welcomed and provided refuge to any Pleasure Island visitors. But nothing lasts forever, and the Adventurers Club and the rest of Pleasure Island no longer fitted into the plans Disney had for the next update to their mega shopping and dining destination. On the 27th of September 2008, the last public opening of the club was held to overflowing crowds, and as the final songs, laughs, and fireworks were held, the Adventurers Club was no more. In 2010, after 2 years of uncertainty, it was announced that they finally had a plan for the closed Pleasure Island. Disney announced that a nostalgic yet modern take on an early 20th century port city and amusement pier will evolve Pleasure Island into Hyperion Wharf. By day, the bustling port district will draw guests in with its stylish boutiques and innovative restaurants, and by night, thousands of lights will transform the area into an electric wonderland. Though ultimately, Hyperion Wharf never happened. Most of downtown Disney's clubs were demolished in 2011 in preparation for Hyperion Wharf, but that was it. Pleasure Island remained as a maze-like walkway of construction walls and nothing more. Disney had realized that to remain relevant, they needed much more than a simple rename and retheme of Pleasure Island's long-abandoned warehouses. In 2013, Disney announced their newly changed plans to turn the entirety of downtown Disney into Disney Springs, an upscale dining, shopping, and entertainment area. The space previously home to Pleasure Island would become The Landing, which would see the demolition of most of the Pleasure Island warehouses, which removed any fading hope that the Adventurers Club would return. The performers had bowed their last bow. The audience had laughed their last laugh. And everyone had hollered their last kungaloosh. But as we know, great ideas in themed entertainment always manage to live on, and Imagineers have used what they learned from the Adventurers Club all over the world. Trader Sam's Enchanted Tiki Bar is one of the best examples of Disney capturing the detail and appeal of the club, featuring mini shows and events that make the club feel alive. Though most Disney fans will agree that the Adventurers Club formed the basis of one of the greatest ever tales told by Imagineering, the Society of Explorers and Adventurers, though that is perhaps a story for another time. For a lot of Disney fans, the defunct attractions they wish they could have experienced most usually include things like Horizons, Journey into Imagination, and Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter. But for me, if I could have experienced anything firsthand, it would have to have been the Adventurers Club on Pleasure Island. Marching along were adventurers, singing the song of adventurers, up or down, north, south, east or west. An adventurer's life is best. Kungaloosh. For ReviewTyme, I'm Luke Carroll. Thanks for watching.